Hi everybody, Happy New Year and welcome to day 3 of my daily video uploads at a ring in the new year. Today I'm talking about the most surprising books that I read in 2021. So I go into every single book that I read expecting to enjoy it, otherwise I wouldn't have picked it up in the first place, but there are some that I go into and I come out from reading them and I ended up loving them so much more than I expected to, or I just didn't expect it to go the way that it did, and it's just so much fun when that happens with a book. I really enjoy when that does happen. That's come up, a lot of my favourite books are actually ones I just never expected to enjoy. And yeah, I just kind of want to talk about the ones that happened to me in 2021. So the first one was Thorne, and this was one that I was given to me by a friend of mine, so it's not one that I actually picked out for myself. And it's a retelling of this story called The Goose Girl, which is not a tale I'm familiar with. It's definitely not one I've seen done as a retelling before, in this huge retelling trend that is going on, particularly in YA. I hadn't seen one about the Goose Girl before. And so I had no expectations going into it. I loved this book so much. The Theft of Sunlight, the second one, has come out and I really actually want to try and get a hold of a copy of it because it sounds amazing. And yeah, I just absolutely ended up enjoying this one. The main character is so fantastic and the journey she goes on is really, really compelling to watch. The world is really interesting, the arc she goes through. Oh, it was just brilliant. I was just so surprised by it because I just had, like I said, I had absolutely no idea what this book was going to be about before I started reading it. And by the end of it, I was completely hooked on this book and this world, and I'm really, really excited to read The Theft of Sunlight when I finally get hold of a copy of it. So thank you very much to Anna for giving me this. And last year I had a bunch of gift cards to use, so I went on, I went online to Waterstones because by that point Scotland was in full lockdown, so I couldn't go to the bookshop. And one of the ones that I kind of just seen floating around that was on my TBR a little was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell, and I read it, and again, just enjoyed it far more than I was expecting to. It's such a fun sort of heist story. There's a little bit of found family, fantastic diverse characters as well that I wasn't expecting. The main character is really, really compelling. The sort of elements of time travel and the effects that has on the future if you go back into the past was really well thought out as well. I love when things have time travel and they actually take into account the consequences of changing things in the past and pushing one foot wrong. This book really, really went into that, and again, it's a trilogy that I really want to continue with because I just wasn't expecting to fall in love with it as much as I did, but it had so many interesting points. I loved the setting of the sort of early 1900s, kind of 1910 sort of setting that it was in. Absolutely fascinating, fantastic progression. I was able to guess some of the plot twists, but that didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book. Was just really, really great, and as I said, it was just such a surprise because it was just one that I kind of just ordered on a whim just to see how good it was going to be. Another book that I was really surprised by was All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue. I was just in a bit of a witchy mood. My friends actually recently got me into tarot and stuff. I've actually got a tarot deck on its way. I might do an unboxing for that. And it's a story about a girl who finds a tarot deck in a sort of cupboard in her school, and then she starts doing, starts getting into tarot and some witchy stuff, and one day she starts doing readings for all the girls in her school, and one day she does a reading for her ex-best friend, and a card that she's never seen before turns up, and then the next day her friend goes missing, and she's convinced it's something to do with that housekeeper card that came up. Absolutely fascinating story. I absolutely loved it. I was just so surprised with how much I loved it, and the LGBTQ+ themes that it deals with as well, within the context of, the Republic of Ireland and the very sort of Catholic sort of views that are still very prominent there. It was just so interesting. It had so many interesting things that all weave together very well. I liked the stuff with religious groups versus LGBTQ+ groups. That is something I find obviously difficult to read, but obviously it's very relevant and stuff for those of us in that community and stuff, so it was really interesting as well. Then combined with this stuff of tarot in the modern world and stuff, since that is such a huge thing now, there's been quite a trend of people actually getting into some more witchy shit, and yeah, I just loved that book so much. It was such good fun. I really recommend it if you just want a good YA sort of, mystery sort of witchy kind of story. There's going to be a sequel, which I'm so excited about. The characters as well are all really interesting. Our main character is so unlikable, and but she's going on this journey to become a more likeable person, and really, I love stories like that where actually the main character is actually not a great person and the books are about them becoming a better person. I can't wait to read more of that, and as I said, I was just so surprised by how much I actually ended up enjoying that book. One that I've mentioned in books already, who's seen my top 10 books, my sort of best books of 2021, is Blackwing by Ed McDonald. I'd seen a review for this book done by Megan's Reading Revelations, and then just the very next day I happened to see the book in the library and I thought, it's fate, I must check it out and read it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's the world building really that absolutely sold me on that story, as well as the plot and the characters, because they're all very, very compelling, but just the world building is just so good, unlike anything I've seen for a while, but still with that sort of gritty kind of fantasy that you're used to seeing. I just wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, but it's easily one of my favourite books of the year. I really want to continue with this series, I just haven't had time to get around to it because, you know, there's so many books and so little time. You know how it goes. And, oh, it was just brilliant, and if you haven't read it, I definitely recommend checking it out because it was just such a good surprise to find out how much I actually loved that book. Another book that I was surprised by, which is another library pickup, was Gods of Jadens Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's such a gentle and dark sort of story about Aztec gods and the god of death trying to reclaim parts of himself and the relationship he builds with the human girl that you're following. She's a fantastic character. I do have a spoiler-free review for this book actually, which I will link to in the cards and in my description. Again, just wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. It was a really, really interesting and refreshing story to read. You know, it was a very refreshing writing style. I'm definitely going to be reading more of Silvia Moreno Garcia. I've actually bought one of her books, Certain Dark Things, which is her new one. I'm going to be getting to that in the new year. Just, again, you know, I think just because I'd happened to see it just on the shelf in the library and just kind of picked it up, I think adds to the fact that I really, really enjoyed it, because it's not one that I went out of my way to go and get. It just happened to be there and I went, oh yeah, that looks interesting. And I loved it, and it was really, really great. So yeah, I mean, I love it when that happens, where you just pick up a book and it ends up being really, really good. So I'm really, really excited to read more of that author's work. Once again, my camera died, or well, it didn't die, it ran out of storage. I didn't realise until halfway through filming the video, so halfway through editing, so I am just going to wrap up my most surprising list reads for 2021. So next up is Empress of Salt and Fortune by Li Vo. Now this was just one that I can't even remember how I came across it. I think it was perhaps in a list of, you know, books with main characters who are non-binary or use they them pronouns. So then I was looking into it and stuff, and when I needed a sort of short kind of story to listen to or read for the readathon I took part in October, the Trick or Treat-a-thon, I thought I would give Empress of Salt and Fortune a go, and I absolutely loved this book. It was so good. It's this fantastic oral storytelling between these two characters where you find out about the Empress who just died from one of her old handmaidens, and through all these oral stories you hear first just about who she was and the relationship that she and this woman had with each other, and then going on to the wider plot and the wider sort of shit that she was getting up to when she was Empress and stuff. And I mean, it's just such a brilliant book. I loved the audiobook of it because I think the fact that it was, you know, oral storytelling, the fact that then I had to listen to it really, really lent into that. I just really, really loved this one. I cannot recommend it enough to people. You know, it's one of my favourites of the year as well, although stupidly it didn't make it onto the favourites of the year list. You can tell I was doing that in kind of a hurry. But it was basically just such a fantastic way to tell the story, and you got such a good idea of these characters and how the story built and the sort of twist at the end and things. Oh, I just really, really enjoyed that one. Another surprising book for me was The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. Because if you've seen my sort of more like, you know, my least favourite books from last year, one of the first ones on there is Sorcerer to the Crown by that same author. And I happened to just sort of give them I wanted to give them another chance because I'd seen the cover for The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water. I mean, it's just beautiful. And, you know, and I just kind of wanted to give them another go. You know, I do like to give authors more than one chance before I completely write off their kind of writing. And I loved The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water. It's a fantastic novella that I again listened to an audiobook, and I think that really helped me to, you know, enjoy Zen Cho's writing style a bit more. I definitely found that, you know, it was just more digestible and stuff, but especially the dialogue. I do find Zen Cho's dialogue to be a bit odd, but it lent itself really well to being read aloud. And The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water is just this short novella about this nun who ends up with this band of sort of bandits, really, and she sort of forms a friendship with one of the men in that group, and you sort of see their relationship develop, and they sort of discuss both of their ties to the Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water, which is the order that this nun comes from. And you get this fantastic, just sort of this snapshot into this world and these people. And I just think the novella format really, really lent itself well to this story, because it didn't need to be this grandiose, epic book. It was just this short story about this woman learning about all these different guys and just making new friends and having sort of new experiences with them and things. I really, really loved it. I'm really happy that I loved it as well, because I really wanted this author to, like, you know, be as good as I'd heard they were. So yeah, I think in the future though, if I am reading more Zencho's work, I might start off with the audiobook first. And then last but not least, one of the most surprising books that I just wasn't expecting to love was Midnight in Everwood. This is just one that I happened to have seen on the bookshelves at work, and then also just kind of circulating a little bit online, because it's got such a beautiful cover and it's a sort of Christmassy, you know, it's a retelling of the Nutcracker, which takes place on Christmas Eve. It is just this really, really interesting story, and I'm not really, you know, I don't know the story of the Nutcracker that well. My only experience is with the Barbie movie and with the Nutcracker in the Four Realms on Disney+. And I read this in one go, and I'm still thinking about it. I loved this so much. And I think it's just because I just kind of, it was a cover buy basically, and I just wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, but I did, and I'm still thinking about it, and it was just so Christmassy and whimsical and magical, and such a really good story of the Nutcracker, and your main character goes through such a fun, compelling arc that I just couldn't put it down, and it just put me in such a Christmassy mood. It was actually a bit of a shame because I read it after Christmas, but I just really, really loved this one, and I think, you know, the stuff it does with its characters and the plot and things, it's really well paced. But, you know, again, just I think the fact that it was almost entirely a cover buy is why it's so surprising to me, because I've had a few cover buys in the year that weren't as good, but then this one absolutely lived up to it, and I'm just so happy about that. But that's it for all the sort of surprising books from 2021. You know, what are books that you went into that you weren't expecting to love as much as you did, but then you did? Let me know down in the comments. Have you read any of the books that I've mentioned here? I'd love to hear from you and hear what your opinion of them was. If I have spoiler reviews for any of them, I'll leave you a link to those in the cards and possibly also in the description. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.